Hello there, my name is Corey Pitzer. I'm the CEO and founder of SafeMap International. I want to share with you a very simple approach to the 7C's of safety culture. What is safety culture? Well, it's not what you hear people tell you. It's what they don't tell you and what you don't hear. Because you may be listening to the loud people in the organization, and the silent majority, they don't speak up. So what you hear may not be what's really there. And if we look at safety culture in this way, it takes on another dimension. There's two aspects of it. One is the safety climate, and that is what's visible above the waterline, the iceberg you can see. Safety culture is what's below the waterline and what you can't see. Typically, what is visible? First of all, the vision of the organization. Vision statement, it's a poster on a wall. Often it states what the organization's vision is. The organization has strategies, management strategies to ensure that that vision is deployed. There are also a lot of practices in place, leadership practices, supervisor practices. These are the practices that create from the strategies some effect and outcome and drives toward human performance. Human performance is primarily driven by processes, how we remunerate people, how we discipline people if they make mistakes, how do we incentivize people. These are processes that are essential for creating the organization's outcome. The systems in the organization are typically the safety systems. What kind of safety audits do we do? How do we do those audits? What do we do with the information? How do we measure safety? All of these aspects are systems issues. And then there's behavior, the actions of people on the shop floor, the actions of people across the organization to comply with rules and regulations, to fit in with the strategies, to drive towards that vision. It's visible, and that's what we can see in the organization. What we are not focusing on much is what's below that waterline, which is the real culture in the organization. And I want to share with you 7 characteristics or aspects of it. Now, remember what I said. Safety culture is not what you hear people tell you. It's not what's just visible and obvious. Below the visibility of the organization, what is invisible is the culture. The first characteristic of it is something that is created. If we don't create a culture in the organization, it will be created for us. It will just happen in a random way, and it can be a very difficult thing to manage or to control or to direct and drive forward. So we must first of all understand it is a creation of who? Especially leaders. It is something that must be systematically created, continuously created, because culture fades like anything in the organization. If you don't sustain it, it will start losing its impact. Very importantly, it must be done collaboratively. You cannot have the top management decide what culture they want and then start creating it, the building blocks I'll show you in a moment. Or a department, often the HR department, they do the culture in the organization. That's not how it works. It must involve the middle management, the supervisory management, and the workers directly. Because if you don't do it like that, you're not having something that can be sustained. So what are these characteristics? First of all, it must be connected. Well, connected with what? It must be connected with the DNA of the organization. What is the DNA of the organization? It is the history of the organization. It is the values of the organization. And it's driven by what we believe we are. Now, organizations can vary fundamentally and dramatically about this DNA, about who they really are. But you must start with that. You must start with why. Why do we want safety? Who are we? And why do we want it? And then the crafting of the vision that we've done as part of the management side of it, our culture must link with that. We must create the culture and craft it so that it reflects that vision. Secondly, it must be congenial. Now, this may be sounding like a strange word to use. Culture is often repressive. It's often submissive. People do what they're being told to do. People comply to rules and regulations, especially on safety side. Because if people make mistakes and accident happens, People are not very happy about that. Management gets angry sometimes, and there's consequences for people. Well, a culture that operates on fear is not a culture that's going to sustain. It must be a culture that is inspiring. It must be positive. And as such, it must activate people's actions. It must captivate their imagination. It must captivate their willingness to co-create this. It must captivate their willingness to be part of it. And once we have a culture at that positive level, people will be inspired to take actions and people will show initiative. Otherwise, they'll just wait for you to tell them what to do and they'll just do the bare minimum. We want them to go beyond what is required. Thirdly, it must be cohesive. Now, what is cohesiveness? It is all leadership actions must drive the same culture. We must do as leaders what we tell people they must do. If we don't follow our own policies, if we don't follow our own commitments, people are going to see that very quickly. And the culture will start driving their own risk-taking behavior and behavior in which they compromise safety. We cannot compromise on our own messages. Our messages must be consistent. It must be constantly given. Because if we stop focusing on it, if we stop creating the images of what we want the culture to be, it will start to fade. And not only that, all organizations exist in silos. If it's not departments, it's regions or locations, and we start to have a splintering of different cultures in the organization. We have to communicate across those silos, across those barriers to make sure that we're all in this process together. The fourth building block is clarity. Clarity comes about when people are willing to speak up and speak out. Now, they speak up and out about concerns. They speak up and out about risks they see. They speak up and out about incidents that happen that otherwise they could have hidden, and they don't because they want to speak up about it. Now, people won't do that if they're going to be fearing the consequences of speaking out. If there's going to be negative reaction, negative discipline, then they're just going to keep quiet. And we won't know what it is that's really happening at the front end. For that, we must have a fair culture. We must have a culture in which people know that if they make a mistake, that they won't be treated unfairly, a just culture. And only in those circumstances can we learn as an organization and can we be flexible at the front end to respond quickly to changes around us. The organization's culture must be competent. Now, what does that mean? It means, and this to me is one of the most important aspects, there must be authority to people to act. If people see something wrong, if people see somebody doing something wrong, they must feel confident. They must have the courage to go up and take action, to stop that person, to stop that work, to stop that process. This is the last line of defense in all organizations. If we don't have this authority at the front end, we will see accidents come one after the other. This is a very important aspect. For that, we must have open systems. We must have systems that quickly respond to people's actions, quickly respond to people's authority. And very importantly, it must be simple. We must create simplicity in the organization, not complexity. We must translate the vision into simple work processes, into simple rules and regulations that people have been part of, and that they actually feel they've contributed to. And then only will this organization's culture reach competence. Finally, it must be a caring culture. Caring is the most important aspect of any culture. If people feel they are being valued, they are engaged, you want safety for your business because you care about people, people will feel valued. And safety must be about the total well-being of people, not just about preventing accidents from day to day, not just creating good safety records. People must feel that the organization care about them. That's the fundamental why of why we do safety. If that message is missing, people will go missing as well. Now, those are all the aspects of a safety culture, the 7 C's. They have to be worked on constantly, every day. Now, typically, this is what happens in organization. The top side, the visible side, that's how we manage the business. And most of the time, most effort goes into that. And very little effort goes into the 7C's that I've just explained. And yet, in the end, the most impact on people's behavior, the most effect on safety will come from the 7C's. We must double the effort on those that is not visible in the organization. I hope this helped you a bit to understand what is the foundations of safety, the fundamentals of safety, and it's the 7C's. Thank you very much. Goodbye.